for the results. And yeah, this week was a lot better in terms of everything, really. So let's get into it, because you know how concise I can be. Wednesday night, I was feeling a little bit, anxious about, I don't know, whether I should go to the thrift store or not. It's normal. I always get that feeling. And I always tell myself that, what if I find, Bubble 2 or Vectrix. So, anyways, I go to the thrift store on Thursday, and right by the door, hold on a second. There we go, much better, right? Much better lighting. Right by the door, jammed between like several crates, and it had some boxes, small boxes stacked up on top of it. Excuse me. It was like it was waiting there for me, but it wasn't even really noticeable, except for someone with a trained eye. That's right, an action set. How freaking awesome is that? Now, this store was having like 50% off sale at the end of the month, and so everything in the store was half price, half off the marked price, and this was marked at $39.99. So I ended up getting it for $20. Unveiling it on the floor, I was curious to see what it had inside, but I was also to see what was inside of the box itself. I was expecting probably a Mario Duck Hunt, but instead I found Bobble Part 1. It's still good. It's a great game, but I already have it. But it's much better than finding another Duck Hunt. Although I don't really have too many doubles of that game. I think I only have 2 copies of it, surprisingly enough. I just don't like to buy doubles. And look at that. It's a code for level 94. But yeah, I mean, the thing is well used. It's kind of dirty, but that's not a problem. Have you ever thought about like how something gets to you, when you buy in the thrift stores, like a game or a system? Like, what does it go through to get to you? All the packaging, it's brand new on the shelf, and someone unwraps it and uses it, and then eventually, like, collects dust. And I could imagine someone, playing this during the summer months, and sun just blazing through the window and scorching them, scorching the boredom out of them, and they're playing the same old game. They have maybe 10 games, and then it just like sits there for months and months, neglected, and eventually packed away. Never to see light again until years later when you find it in a thrift store. So we're giving new life to these things, Yeah. How many of you found a complete in-box Nintendo this week? What about an action set? Now, I had seen some Nintendo games earlier, about maybe a week or 2 ago at this place, and they were selling them for $20 and a pack of 4. 2 packs of 4 and then 1 pack of 2, which was $12. And so I decided to get one of the packs because it had some not too pricey games, but at the same time it was, I think, a better deal when, after the discount had been $10. Mario, Duck Hunt, and Track Meet, Double Dragon 3, Double Dragon 2, and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. All these games are in really good condition, and all of them have their manuals. Before I left, I of course checked out the glass case, which we're all too familiar with when we go into these stores, and I saw an edge of a Game Boy game in one of the cases behind the counter, so I asked to see it, and I ended up pulling out all the Game Boy games they had there, and see what we got here. Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle 2, Mickey Mouse Magic Wands, Jurassic Park, Casper, and Tetris. I really wouldn't have gotten any of these, but they were 50 cents a pop. They were marked at $1, half off 50 cents. So I mean, they're like candy, and I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna keep maybe one of them I'll keep. I don't know. I was thinking maybe playing through Jurassic Park, although it can be boring. But yeah, I mean, most of my Game Boy games are like complete in box, and it was basically that was my system pretty much growing up. And I don't know, for some reason I kept everything in really good condition, and I traded some games into Funkoland, but I kept a lot. And even like, you know, like Game Boy Advance and further handheld systems, I always kept everything just because, I don't know, it was just a trend that just I never stopped. Yeah, I think there's maybe one or two games I got from Funkoland, and I never was able to get their boxes from Funkoland at the time. So anyways, Friday, there was supposedly this rummage sale at a church from where I lived. You know, I was within walking distance pretty much, and I wanted to get there because it started before work, so I wanted to get there early in the morning, and ended up finding nothing really too much game related except for this awesome Pac-Man mug, and this thing is a beast. This is real glass, you know. It says 1982 on here, but yeah, I mean they were saying they wanted $5 for it, and I actually tried to get it down to $3, but they really wouldn't budge, and I really didn't know what the value of this was. I still don't, but either way, I never see this, so I decided to pick it up. It's pretty awesome, I think. After that, I felt pretty darn hyped up, and I was like, you know what, I think I can check out my Goodwill before I leave for work. I did see in the case a Wavebird and its receiver for $5.50, and I also saw this smack dab in the front, just sitting there like whang, right against the glass. And this was for $5.50. I got the GameCube version of Twilight Princess in pretty good condition, no manual, but it had the guide and it's stuck to it. There's tape here, and that's not going to tear or anything. I haven't taken it off yet, but it shouldn't. So yeah, I mean, that was pretty awesome find. Going into the weekend, I was already pretty darn happy, but I knew this weekend they were having this big community sale that I went to last year as well. And last year, this sale I found at one house, I found Mega Man X3, a complete in box Mega Man 6, a bunch of other N64 and Super Nintendo titles, strategy guides for like Perfect Dark, and manuals for other various N64 games, and ended up spending $15 for that. I actually did take a picture of it at the time, but because I was thinking about starting my own YouTube channel and videos and such, but I still, you know, recorded it because it was a pretty awesome find. So I'll put a picture up and maybe draw arrows to things. At that same house, they didn't even unpack everything from the garage. They said there's probably more stuff, so I wanted to go pretty much to that house first this year because, you know, they may have found more stuff. So that sale started around 9, and I went to a few sales beforehand and didn't find jack. I did find a $75 PS2 with a bunch of sports titles. I headed down to that house, and of course they're not open yet. Nobody's out in the garage driveway. And so I said, you know, I'll check out the other houses. First thing I found was a kid was setting out on his drive a Xbox One, LCD monitor, Samsung LCD monitor, and I asked him, you know, if he had any games, and he brings out Burnout for the Xbox, and I was like, no, do you have anything like older, like maybe Game Boy or Nintendo or Sega? And he says he had a Game Boy, and I was expecting, when somebody's like under 20, which this kid was probably in high school, says they have a Game Boy, it's most likely a Game Boy Advance. So he brings out a Game Boy Advance, but something I really wasn't expecting, although I wish it was in better condition. He brings out a Pokemon Center Game Boy Advance. No back, and it has this giant sunspot in the center there. Turns on and works and everything, but obviously that screen needs to be replaced. I offered him $1 and he took it. That same street, found like a couple that said that the guy was walking around and visiting the other sales, and he saw a sign that said games, and you know, I of course wanted to get to that sale, but I figured I'd check out the rest of the street. Yeah, another weird sale that happened before on that street was, I go up to this guy who's setting up his sale, and he has a bookshelf out with a bunch of books, and he says, "Do you like books, huh?" And he's like, "Yeah, fill your head up with knowledge." And I was like, "Well, I'm kind of looking for entertainment, like video games." And it's like, "Entertainment, huh?" He's like, "Come with me. Come on." He motions for me to come into his garage, and he points to this box and he says, "Come, look at check out the adult section of the garage sale." And I was like, okay. And then I look inside this box, and there's just like a huge amount of porn DVDs, and I was like, "No, I'm just interested in video games. Bye." So yeah, that was a little weird, but guy was very peppy. So anyways, I ended up heading down the street and back onto the main road of this community, and found that one sale the guy was referring to. It didn't say games, but there was a sign that said Nintendo, and it was like in a there was a small little box, and there was a couple standing beside it, and the seller, a girl seller, was she was talking to the couple, and I overheard the woman of the husband and wife couple, who were probably in like their, I don't know, 50s, 60s, it seemed. I don't know, probably 50s. But I overheard her on the phone talking to someone. He said, "Just get them all." And I saw that they had a stack out of like 5 or so games, and I rushed over to that box and was looking through, and I was like, "Oh, what games did you pick out?" Because I didn't see what they had, and he was just going through some really generic titles like Dr. Mario 3, some football game, Dragon Warrior, the first one, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I got these games, blah blah blah," and he's like, "There's even another Dragon Warrior in there," so, which I wasn't interested in. But I started looking through the box, and they're pretty like common titles: Tiger Healy, another Dragon Warrior, Hogan's Alley, Little Mermaid. Yeah, I mean, they really weren't exciting titles. Spy versus Spy, and one stuck out to me was Super C, and I picked up maybe around 5 titles, and I then saw that the box said $5 each. And I talked to the lady, and she's like, "Yeah, I really can't go down on the price too much, or at all," because she was selling them for some other person, some guy she knew. I don't know if it was her boyfriend or what, but I ended up putting back all titles but 2, Spy vs. Spy, which I never see, and I have no idea its value, and it could be a fun game, and that Super C, obviously. So Super C looks like it was chewed on, like it was a dog's chocolate bar, and it has like some pen marks, and I got Spy vs. Spy. I ended up using my charms, and I got her down to $6 for both of these. A little bit down from that house, I was asked about the games or whatever, and father asked his son to wake up again, 'cause nobody's up at this time apparently. And the son brings down a Game Boy Advance, 2 games, and a charger. Originally they wanted like $30, but I was able to get them down to 7. And they said they had more games, but yeah. There's actually something interesting about this black Game Boy I will share with you in a little bit. I actually do head back to that first house, which, like I said, I visited last year. Same guy from last year setting up, and he said, "Hey, I introduced myself," and then he remembered and everything, and he said, "I'm still emptying out my garage, but if I find anything, I'll set it aside for you, so, come back." The next thing I found was another black Game Boy Advance. At the same sale, I also found Mario Party 6 in kind of shitty condition, at least the case art is, and even the disc is It's I mean, there's some. Well, there's a lot of a lot of light scratches. The guy said he wanted $5, and he was pretty firm about it. What about 4? He's like, he begrudgingly, accepted it. But now I did want to note. So this is the GBA I got from the other sale, and this is the GBA I just got from that guy. I noticed only later on that this one has gray buttons and this one is black, and I was like, I never saw a black GBA like that. And then I looked at the back, and the all black one, the one with the black buttons, is an AGS 101. And the funny thing is, I didn't even know that they made a black model of the... This is the one that has a backlit screen. This is the front lit model, the AGS 001. So, yeah, I thought they only came in that light blue color and the pink. Not too much, actually, I got after that. There was a kid who had a PS2. He said it was broken, and then he said come back in like half an hour. Ended up missing that because I spent too much time at other sales. And he said when I came back like an hour later, he had already sold to somebody else. Another sad thing was, oh man, I asked a guy if he was selling any of these games or whatever, and he, says Sega, the word Sega pops out to him, and he goes into his garage and he starts rummaging through this box, and I see him pull out a large black object, and I thought, is that a Sega Master System? But then I saw a silver strip, and I was like, holy shit. And so I was standing quite a bit away from him because I was waiting for him to come out with stuff. And I said, oh, is that an Atari 5200? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, that's my Atari. And I was like, he said he had 2 of them. And I was like, oh, I gotta get this Atari, because that's literally the second Atari 5200 I've seen since I started garage sailing, now almost a year and a half ago, let's say. I don't think it's been 2 years, but either way, that's the only one. And the one I bought for $15 was broken. So I don't know, maybe because I was too excited or whatever, but he wouldn't sell me any of the 5200s. He said he had 2. I don't know where the other one was, but I was just happy to see a 5200, and this one was a 4-port model, which, requires that adapter. So anyways, he wouldn't budge. He wouldn't let me buy it from him. He actually had some other Sega Master System games in there, but they were card only, and I really didn't care for those ones that he had. So, yeah, I moved on from that. I did end up coming across these at 2 different yard sales, people who really look down upon, people who play video games and such. There was a lady who said that she was like almost offended that I was asking her, and she was like, she took pride in how she'd never gave her kids or allowed them to play video games, and she was worried about her grandkids now getting into them or whatever. So whatever, that's bullshit. And then there was another guy who I asked, and he was like, I use computers to control power plants, not play games. I was like, come on, buddy, it's a hobby, Anyways, I ended up going back to that first house and finding, that he had set aside some N64 games like Rogue Squadron and Pod Racer, and some Game Boy Advance games, and a charger for Game Boy Advance. So I picked up Kirby's Dream Land, Nightmare in Dreamland, Metroid Fusion, and Link to the Past, 4 Swords. So, I asked what he wanted for it, and he's like, well, whatever you want. He just was trying to get rid of them, and I was like, well, did you take $1 a game? He's like, okay. And I actually only had in terms of single bills, I only had 2 George Washingtons, but I gave him 5 and asked for change, but he didn't have any, so he said, I'll just take the $2. So he's a really nice guy. There was actually one other house that I was kind of looking forward to in that large sale. They last year I was there and I was asking about games, and the guy, when I was talking to him and asking about like Sega and Nintendo, whatever, he motions back, looks into his garage, and I can see in like one of those clear storage bins, like rows of Sega CD cases. And he said they were his son's, but he was like in Australia or something. I gave him, of course, my info and everything, but I never heard back from him. So I was hoping that they'd set up shop and I could ask them about it, but no such luck. They weren't holding any kind of garage sale this year at their place. I was pretty much up at 5:30 waiting to get out early in the morning, and at this time it was like 3 something, and I was already 2 shades darker. That sun was pretty damn bright and hot. So I was kind of giving up and saying, I'm gonna go home. But I was like, man, again, what if you find something cool at the thrift store? So I went down to the other town. They were still having that 50% off sale. I ended up finding a S-video cable for PlayStation, and its case and everything. Marked it $1, so I ended up spending 50 cents on that. And then I found, well, I said this in my last video, I saw this, but I didn't really want it. But it was a unique thing, and I never see these, so it's a Nintendo controller. As you can see, it's plugged, but it's made by Hori, and it's some sort of like flight simulator joystick. I guess you can choose which A button and B button you want to use, and it's got like a little switch here that I haven't tried it out. It's really dirty. I'm not going to use this until I clean it up, but I think what it does is it switches between 4 directions and 8 directions. So if you're kind of leaning down and to the left, it'll probably choose down instead of down and to the left. It'll there's only 4 directions it can choose from rather than 8. And then this switch here, which is like a triangle, and then another triangle that's split up, like has these little sections. I'm thinking that might be like a turbo control, but I am not sure. So there wasn't a price on it. The lady ended up giving it to me for marking it at $3, and then with the 50% off, it was $1.50. So it was a pretty good deal, I think. In terms of games, I guess I wasn't too happy, but I meant, how many people have... I really want to know, like, how many of you found a box Nintendo this week? It's pretty awesome that something like that still exists, can be found out in the wild, so, for as cheap as $20. So, yeah, I hope you guys had an awesome week, too, and, yeah, you know what to do. Get out there and get hunting.